And in a matter of like 2 to 3 weeks, not only did we have a fantastic logo, but we also had about 20,000 people in our Telegram group. So that kind of just illustrates the power of these sort of crowd problems that we're trying to solve, which is how do we get a group of people to work together to solve a problem that everyone can help contribute to. So the first application that we're actually launching to the public, and that's actually going to be launched very, very soon, is called Jobson. I'll do a demo at the very end, just showing you a very, very early and rough beta of what that looks like. The idea there is instead of looking for a red balloon, we're looking for someone that we want to hire. And as sort of a side note, at our own company, we've been deploying this same sort of algorithm in our own hiring, though we haven't had like a shiny UX, we've just kind of had our own word of mouth. But what's an interesting note is that almost everyone that works for nCent was either a direct referral, or the referral of a referral, or like the referral of a referral of a referral. I think the deepest we've gone is 3 deep. And it's already had tremendous success for our own hiring. And we've already signed about 25 pilot agreements with customers, many of which are startups, some of them are larger enterprise companies that want to deploy that same sort of algorithm for their own hiring. So we're pretty excited to kick that off in the near future. Another sort of application that we're working on, we haven't launched quite yet, is what we call retail scent, which is how do we incentivize groups of people to get the word out about a specific brand or a specific product and basically do affiliate marketing for that product. So right now there's all sorts of affiliate marketing companies. Some are a little bit sketchier than others. Of course there's like the multi-level marketing companies that get kind of a bad rap. What we're doing is we're introducing a totally trustless system that makes it very easy for anyone to create their own affiliate marketing campaign for any product and in a completely trustless and transparent way provide economic incentives for you to tell your friends about the next great product. So maybe right now you're a huge fan of Nike shoes and there's sort of this tribal audience around Nike shoes. What if you would actually be compensated for getting your friends to buy Nike shoes? Maybe you're already getting your friends to buy Nike shoes today, but the value just isn't being attributed back to you in a convenient way. We're going to make it really easy for you to do that. And a lot of our customers that we've already started signing up are very interested in how do we use this technology for affiliate marketing, or how do we use this technology for our own rewards programs, getting people to refer their friends into our rewards programs or into our applications. And then lastly, this is like, I think, a pretty good example of a crowd type problem, getting a bunch of people to contribute to solving a problem. We have what we call BuildSent. All of our applications end in cent because we're nCent. So, the idea with BuildSent is that we can provide some sort of a grant and then distribute that grant to developers in the most efficient way possible to incentivize all of them to contribute to this open source software. So you might see a theme here that we're a little bit self-serving in that Jobson is helping us hire, BuildSent is going to help us build our own technology, Retail Sent is going to help us acquire customers for our protocol. That was a little bit strategically decided. We have this giant sort of list of use cases that we think that this technology will be useful for, and we're just sort of building for ourselves to get started. Oh, and then the other thing I should talk about is BugSent, which is sort of like the red balloon problem, except looking for bugs in software and offering these bug bounties to people who can get their friends to help find bugs in your software. So our go-to-market strategy is sort of like twofold. There's like the consumer side, which is getting actual users, and then there's the enterprise side, which is getting pilots and people to actually build on our platform. So on the consumer side, we're going to be providing a big airdrop. I don't want to like throw out numbers, but it'll be pretty focused probably in Asia, specifically in Japan and Korea, maybe in Hong Kong and Singapore as well. We're hoping to get a lot of users just from that. We're providing protocol incentives, and I'll get into what that means in a little bit. And then on the enterprise side, our strategy is sort of threefold. So one, we're creating these applications that we hope that we can get enterprise adoption for, the first being Jobson. And we've already got 25 companies signed up to use that. The second is more bespoke applications for specific enterprise partners. And there we've signed a couple of pilot agreements that I can't go into detail on, but I think one example might be a large nonprofit that wants to do crowdfunding. How can we incentivize people to participate in that? And then the third is sort of we're working on an ecosystem investment fund with some of our investors to actually deploy capital into startups that are interested in developing on top of our protocol. And we've actually started already doing these hackathons to get developers excited about our protocol. Back in the Bay Area, we've had probably 2 or 3 hackathons to date. Probably a total of about 100 developers have come through. So we've actually hired some developers through those hackathons, which has been great as well. And we're actually opening that up now so that we're going to call it a remote hackathon, so anyone can participate globally. And for our next one, we already have a bunch of universities signed up: Stanford, University of Chicago, Columbia, University of Moscow. We just talked with some folks in Hong Kong when we were there recently that were interested in participating. We're hoping we'll get participation here in Japan as well, and hopefully in Singapore and Seoul, where we're headed next for our hackathons. But that's sort of our general go-to-market strategy. So yeah, 25 pilots and counting. We're very proud of that. We actually don't have any business development team right now, so most of these have just been either LPs of our investors that heard about us, or projects that our investors invested in, or just sort of random connections, people that heard about what we were doing from one way or another and reach out to us. We're kind of entering a paradigm shift as a company now where we've been very focused on just building the technology, and now we're kind of like, holy shit, we have to actually deploy it with customers now. There's all this interest, so we're starting to build out a business development team and what we call like a forward deployed engineering team that can actually work with partners. So the actual design itself, there's 2 types of incentives to use our network. So on Bitcoin, there's obviously mining, which is all these people are participating in this sort of group puzzle, and whoever solves the puzzle first gets this reward. With Stellar and SCP, there is no mining reward right now. So the reason you would want to have a validator node on Stellar is so that you get quick access to the data. The fortunate thing about Stellar is that it's basically, running a node is basically like running an email server, so it's not very computationally intensive. So there isn't really a huge cost associated with running a Stellar node. But what we've seen with Stellar is that they've actually had a little bit of difficulty becoming more decentralized and providing a strong incentive to get people to participate as a validator, even though it is cheap and useful and you can acquire data easily. So we're going to be providing validator incentives, which will basically be a way to get our enterprise customers to run their own validator nodes and subsidize the cost of them creating their own challenges on our network. The other thing that we're doing is we're creating this sort of, I don't know, there's some like buzzword thing there. Basically think of it as like we're building an airdrop directly into the protocol. So the idea is that we're going to have identity linked into the protocol using some third-party identity solutions that already exist that will be sort of oracled in. And then if you create a wallet on our network and it's validated using these third-party identity solutions, then we give you some reward N/2 from the network. Then if you refer someone and they create a wallet and they have a validated wallet, then they get some reward N/2 and you get N/4, and then N/2, N/4, N/8, and so on. So basically we're providing a strong incentive to be an early adopter of our platform and then to share it with as many of your friends as you can. So what is NCNT? That's our token on our network, because of course we're a blockchain company, we must have some sort of cryptocurrency. In this case, NCNT is a utility token, and that means that you use it to operate the network. So there's some computational burden for every transaction that hits the network, and the way you pay for that is using this token. This is the reward token for the validator incentives and for the sort of self-propagating airdrop that we're building into the network. So the way you would use it is based on the computational complexity of the contract that you're creating on the network. It would cost a certain number of NCNT to deploy that contract. So imagine that if you were doing a Jobson style contract, which is this recruiting use case, maybe you only want to create 50 invitations and maybe they only go a few layers deep. So you can only transfer an invitation, say, like 4 or 5 times. That's going to be a lot less expensive than if you're, say, Coca-Cola and you want to distribute Coke cents to 20 million people and you want people to be able to pass their invitations around like 100 times. That's exponentially more complex and more burdensome for the network, so it's going to cost more NCNT to deploy that type of a contract. So what's a little bit novel about what we're doing and what I think really differentiates it from other blockchain protocols is that as a user of our protocol, you don't need to know what NCNT is, and you don't need to have a balance of NCNT. In fact, you don't even need to know what a cryptocurrency is. So Ethereum today, you could theoretically build nCent on Ethereum, but the biggest issue is sort of a UX thing, which is that as a user, in order for you to pass your referral to someone else, you have to have a balance of ETH, which is the currency associated with Ethereum, and you have to pay gas to send that referral to someone else. And that is terrible, because most people don't know what cryptocurrency is, and if they do, they don't want to deal with setting up MetaMask. If any of you have ever used MetaMask, that's like the best UX out there for Ethereum, and even that is very, very hard to use. So what we're doing is we're making so that the creators of these contracts can actually pay for all of the transfers of these invitations up front. So that as a user, you don't need to know that this is even on a blockchain, you're just benefiting from the trust generated by the fact that it is on a blockchain and the security of it being on a blockchain. So what is a challenge? A challenge is basically what we've been talking about. So like Jobson, it could be finding a red balloon. The examples here are how do we crowdsource people to work on some construction project or engage fans. Really, it could be anything, any sort of a search problem or a crowd problem for getting people to work together to solve a problem. And how does the challenge work? I kind of think about it in these 5 steps. So you can create a challenge, you can transfer an invitation to one of these challenges to your friends, you can opt out of a challenge using cash out, and I'll go into details as what that actually means. You can create sub-challenges, meaning that maybe the task that you're trying to complete is kind of complicated, and you want to create derivative challenges from that to solve very specific pieces of that sort of super challenge. Again, I'll go into what that means, and of course you can complete a challenge and be rewarded. So creating a challenge, what does that mean? Well, this is just sort of a list of some of the hyperparameters and things that we think about when you create a challenge. Every challenge will have some sort of expiration tied to it, a number of invitations, a number of times that those invitations can be transferred, obviously some sort of reward. There's a network fee, which is the amount of NCNT that you put down to actually create your contract. Then there's a distribution fee. I'll talk about that in a second. There's other hyperparameters like on-chain versus off-chain. That's a little bit technical, so we'll skip that. Completion criteria, so how do we actually know that the challenge was completed, and how do you decide to issue the reward? So, sharing a challenge. Okay, on-chain and off-chain, so maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. Of course, you can share an invitation to one of these challenges. What we mean by on-chain versus off-chain is if you share an invitation on-chain, it means that the owner of that invitation actually changes on the blockchain. But we can also share invitations off-chain, meaning that you're still the owner of that invitation, but maybe you want to reach the broadest possible audience. And maybe we don't care how many people are exposed to that challenge. Maybe we want to maximize exposure. In that case, you can actually off-chain, so not on the blockchain, cryptographically sign a message, pass it to a friend, then they cryptographically sign the message, they pass it to a friend. Nothing actually happens on the blockchain until there's a redemption event. So there's sort of different use cases where you would and wouldn't want to do that. So in the case of Jobson, you'd want them all to be on-chain because sort of one of the killer features is that we want to minimize the amount of people that are getting referred to the job. So if we only have 50 Jobsons and you only have 1 Jobson, you're only going to refer the person that is the absolute most qualified and who's most likely to not only want the job but also get the job and take the job, because you're trying to get yourself paid. Versus, well, what if I just spammed that invitation to anyone who wanted it on LinkedIn? That's not great, because then all of a sudden that company's going to get bombarded with resumes. It's really no different than how LinkedIn works today. And I mean, we're a small company, we get like bombarded with resumes. It's a huge pain to have to go through them all. The idea of being able to get the best resumes in the quickest amount of time is very appealing to us. Versus off-chain, maybe you're Coke and you want to get the widest possible audience, and so maybe you're okay with exposing these invitations in a more public way that sort of maximizes the audience. The next sort of feature that I like to talk about is called opt-out, and this is also pretty unique to what we're building. The idea is that if you receive an invitation that isn't relevant to you, you can cash it out, which basically means the invitation disappears and you get paid. So the idea is that as a creator of one of these challenges, you actually have to stake some amount of NCNT that the invitation that you're sending is actually relevant to the end user. So as an end user, this means that you have this sort of built-in spam protection. So it's going to become progressively more costly for you to spam the network because you're literally just spamming the network with money. And like as a user of email, like I get a lot of spam, but if I was getting spam with money all day, maybe I'd be a little bit more okay with it. And if you start to think a little bit more long-term, you can start to think think about what a wallet in this case might look like. A wallet, for example, could just automatically cash out any invitation it receives that doesn't have a minimum amount of stake associated with it. Because you're like, well, if you're going to send me this Jobson, but you're only going to attach one NCNT token to it, then you don't have much faith that it's actually relevant to me. The next thing is sub-challenges. So this is sort of a silly example, but imagine that we had a challenge where we were trying to build a car. Maybe I'm really good at building car chassis, but I don't know anything about building a door or an engine. So I'm going to create two sub-challenges that branch from the car challenge, one to build an engine and one to build a door. And then what I'm doing is I'm guaranteeing that in the event that our car that we're all working together to create wins the contest and the redemption event happens, the payment will go directly from me directly to each of the subs in my tree, to each of these subcontracts. So maybe you build the engine, and I say, great, you built the engine. If the car contract wins, you'll automatically get paid. You build the door, I build the chassis, then our car is accepted by whoever issued the challenge. I click done, and now everyone automatically gets paid, and everyone's guaranteed to get paid. And then lastly, you can complete a challenge. So basically what that means is that you click redeem, then some escrow that is tied up in that smart contract is issued to you. You can also theoretically issue your own sort of notional token. So imagine that instead of issuing NCNT, Coke wanted to release, issue Coke cents, and each Coke cent was redeemable for a can of Coke at your local grocery store. That's functionality that we allow. We also allow eventually for you to be able to issue rewards in some sort of a stable coin that could either be on our network that someone's created, or it could be off network. And then sort of one of the biggest areas of research here is oracleization, which is how do we determine that a challenge has actually been completed and it should actually be redeemed. So here we're going to make it very open and provide a pretty extensive API that allows anyone to use any sort of third-party data source they want as sort of the oracle to decide that something has happened. So in many cases, maybe you just trust the issuer of the challenge, and you just trust that if you perform it, they don't want their reputation to get hurt, so they're just going to issue the payment that you're due. But maybe, say it's some sketchy startup, they're doing Jobson, you don't really trust them, there's a lot of friction involved in you believing that the startup will actually pay you if you refer someone. Well, in that case, maybe you work with a third-party Oracle service that guarantees people that they'll get paid because they're the one who actually clicks redeem at the end of the day. So then you don't actually have to trust the company, you can trust any sort of independent third-party Oracle that anyone wants to work with. So that's kind of like the end of the design. I can talk quickly about our stack. So our core, as I mentioned earlier, that's using Stellar's consensus protocol, SCP. We've already released our public sandbox, which is totally not a blockchain, it's just a Node.js server, but it replicates a lot of the functionality that will eventually be on our testnet. We have an API that we've developed. It's a combination of Kotlin, serverless, other technologies. We provide an SDK in JavaScript right now. We're working on Go and Java. We built this thing we call the Meta app, which is sort of like an application framework that makes it very easy to develop your own application very quickly. All you need is like a JSON file, and you click enter, and then poof, you have your own application. You just have to reskin it. And then the applications that we're actively developing ourselves, the first is Jobson. BuildSent is something we're working on. RetailSent is the affiliate marketing app I mentioned earlier. These are all projects that are sort of still in the works. Jobsent's the furthest along, and we're actually about to launch that.